let's talk about the coronavirus, because nobody's sick of hearing about the coronavirus and how communists seem to want indefinite lockdowns, even though none of the data seems to support this. So currently...
What's it got to do with it?
Well, yeah, exactly. What's that got to do with it? So apparently the variant of the coronavirus that has overrun the UK is the Delta variant. I'm no expert, so I'm just going to be going on what the Guardian
This
has
is the
written.
Indian one that we renamed.
This is the Indian one that we've renamed. So apparently it accounts for 99% of England's COVID cases at the moment because it's 40% more transmissible. And you might think, oh my God, that sounds terrible, until you realise that the symptoms of it, the number one symptom is a headache, followed by a sore throat and a runny nose, and occasionally fever. So basically it's a common cold.
Right. But it's still got the ability to kill you if you've got preconditions or very old?
Well, not sure, to be honest, because if we then look at the government's coronavirus dashboard, see the data on this, as you can see, they're doing 7 million plus tests a week. They've got 178,000 positive results, but only 2,000 or less than 2,000 people in 2,000 people in hospital. And yesterday, the daily deaths within 28 days of a positive test were 9.
So that's strange, because my understanding is the deaths are about 2 weeks behind, but not hospitalizations.
Well, that's the data from yesterday.
Yeah.
So, and this variant has been going around for the last month or so now. So if this really is the catastrophe that everyone thinks it is, well, it's not showing in the data. But the thing is, there's good reason to think that this is actually not a problem because it gives you the sniffles. It appears to be about as dangerous as the common cold.
But it could kill you if you're extremely old or whatnot.
Well, yeah, sure, but a cold could kill you if you're extremely old. That's what old people often die of, is respiratory diseases. But the public, of course, is massively vaccinated. I think it's something like almost all over 50s have been double vaccinated now, or something like that. We've been really hammering home those. So you can understand why this isn't this isn't causing very many deaths, because the people who might be susceptible to it have been vaccinated. And so they're complaining, it's all young people getting it, young people at risk. No, they're not. Young people are not at risk of this. As you can see, it's less than, not even double digits.
We've got the percentage there of people who have the doses. 86% of the British public have had the first dose, 64% second dose.
Yeah, staggeringly high, right? So this is not a problem. This is not a threat. It is not overwhelming hospitals, and it is not causing bodies to pile up in the streets. So why are there bots on Twitter promoting that we need to extend lockdown? This is something that Paul Joseph Watson found the other day. And it's just bots, all with exactly the same text. This is disgusting. Masks and social distancing should be in place till minimum Christmas time at the earliest. The governments are clueless. The Delta variant should be taken seriously. We should go into a national lockdown to prevent it spreading. Why?
All these people happen to post the same thing.
Exactly. Yeah, word for word, even with the same lack of capitalization in the this. So this is obviously a bot farm that has been pumping this out.
Who's setting up bot farms to spread COVID fear?
Exactly. That's a great question. Who is doing that? And I don't have the answer to that, by the way. But I think it's just worth noting that this is not something to be afraid of. At least from the information that we have, the data that we have, suggests that this is not a problem. In fact, this is actually a very good thing, because then everyone gets antibodies against COVID from a non-lethal strain of COVID, or what is basically non-lethal.
I liked Ron's response, though. He's like, what does Noam Chomsky have to say about this?
Oh, great question. So it makes you wonder why the SAGE advisors, the SAGE panel, which is the government advisory panel for the coronavirus pandemic, are advising the government to extend lockdowns. Now, this, of course, comes in the wake of Matt Hancock being disgracefully removed from his post and Sajid Javid being introduced. And Sajid is a bit more traditionalist when it comes to British values and doesn't think the government perhaps should be locking us down forever and wants to see things returning to normal. So good news there, to be honest. But what I find really interesting about this is, as Rory's reported, this is behavioural psychologists. These are not scientists, at least epidemiologists, right? Sorry, Josh, didn't mean to throw you under the bus there. These are not biology scientists. They don't study diseases or anything like that. So they're talking about the behaviour of people. And one thing that's very interesting is there seem to be a fair few communists on this advisory panel, or advisors to the advisory panel. One of them is Susanna Mickey. Now, she is a multi-millionairess. She's inherited 52 million from her mother, who who was the daughter of the second Baron Aberconway, an Etonian industrialist. She also sold a Picasso painting for like 50 million. She's got hundreds of millions, right? She obviously
and she's a communist.
And she's a communist, yeah. She obviously
Imagine my
owns
shock.
yeah. She obviously owns a huge estate called mansion called Aberconway House, which is a 20-bedroom mansion in Westminster that she owns and lives in. She also has a 5,000-acre estate in Wales, which is also, nice if you can get it, I suppose.
It's enough room for the 3 kids she's got.
Yeah.
Presumably all grown up and left anyway, but...
Yeah. And so if we can go to her Wikipedia entry quickly, John, you can see that she is herself a clinical psychologist on the SAGE Advisory Group. And she had said that measures meant to combat COVID in 2021, June 2021, she said this, such as face masks and social distancing should continue forever to some extent, adding that I think there's lots of different behaviours we've changed in our lives. We now routinely wear seatbelts where we didn't have to. Yeah, but people were actually dying of car crashes, whereas very few people are dying of COVID. We now routinely wear seatbelts. She said that vaccines, testing and tracing and border controls and people's behaviour were key factors towards controlling COVID-19. Very interesting.
What a bloody lunatic are you?
Well, she's a rich communist. That's the kind of lunatic she is. Yeah. And she went on Good Morning Britain, I think it was yesterday or the day before. And she was asked some questions about Richard Madley. And she gave the left-wing fear-mongering perspective on COVID, which is that there are going to be an overwhelmed NHS. Millions of people are going to die. Millions more will be on long COVID, as if lockdowns can prevent that, because lockdowns haven't prevent the spread of COVID anyway. So she thinks that lockdowns should continue indefinitely. And so Richard grills her with this question. It's quite a good one.
Well, the logical extension of everything you just said would be that you think that we shouldn't lift restrictions at all on the 19th, and we should carry on exactly as we are. Am I right? Is that what you're suggesting?
Well, lifting restrictions will increase transmission. And with all the problems that I've just talked about, it doesn't seem to me the best time to do that.
All right, so
in
you're
fact,
saying we should stick...
if you remember a few weeks ago, we actually postponed lifting restrictions because the situation was so serious. But the situation's even more serious now than it was then.
What is she smiling about? Look at her smile. Can we get the picture up, John? So I can... Look at that smile. Look at that smug bitch face. Look at that smug, rich, annoying, insufferable face. We need to lock down forever. Yeah, that's easy for you to say when you've got a 5,000-acre estate and a 20-room mansion, probably your own private chefs, and God knows how much space and free money to go and do whatever you want with. It's really easy for the incredibly wealthy top 1, or probably higher than 1% of the country,
0.0001%,
to sit there and go, yes, peasants, we need to lock down, or else there might be transmission. There's going to be transmission anyway, and thank God we're all vaccinated, I guess. But this is the smile who knows that they're getting one over on you. You can't present what are apparently tragic things with a massive grin and think that this person isn't getting one over on you. Because if you would, and I mean this from a character analysis perspective, if you are ever dealing with someone who is presenting you with bad news or a bad option and they've got that kind of smug grin on their face, they're owning you. That's what they think they're doing. So let's go to Richard's response.
You've been a member of the Communist Party for about 40 years now. You're still a member. And we know that communism is basically statist. We look at communist countries around the world and we see that they are tremendously top-down dominant and controlled societies that they rule over. And I just wonder, and I'm putting this question on behalf of those who wonder about your politics, if your politics actually informs your sense of control. It's not just the medical argument, but you have a kind of a political bent to want the state to tell people what to do.
I've come on your programme as a scientist, as do all people who come onto your programme as scientists. They come on to talk about the evidence, relevant theories, how we approach our scientific disciplines. And you don't ask other scientists about politics. So I'm very happy to speak about science, which is what my job is, and to limit it to that.
Notice how she is, the tension in her face is gone now. Now she's very well. I mean, I'm not even here to talk about the science.
I hate that routine. I hate people who do that. I'm just a humble scientist.
Yeah.
Yes, I may be an Islamist, but that has nothing to do.
Well,
with
that's
the
exactly it, isn't it? You didn't ask the other scientists about their political affiliations.
Yeah, because they're not commies.
Yeah, exactly. Sure, the other scientists aren't part of the Nazi Party. They haven't been for 40 years. You know,
a member. That's the
still a member. Right?
She shouldn't be on a school board if you're still a member of the Communist
Party. Exactly, but she's a government advisor.
Central government.
This is the SAGE Advisory Committee, right? And just to be clear, your politics clearly inform your beliefs on this because the data obviously doesn't. And I love the implication that scientists are somehow pure and above self-interest, which is a myth we're going to BTFO by the end of this segment.
Lysenko,
right?
pure science.
Yeah, exactly. You know, Goebbels, he's just a scientist. You know, don't worry about the fact that he was a member of the Nazi Party. It's like...
Albert Speer, just an engineer.
Yeah, it's mad. It's mad.
Why does that not follow for any other profession on Earth?
But that's the thing, right?
Hang on, why does science get that out?
Because they are lying to us, that's why. But the left of all political wings, for them to be like, well, don't worry about bias. Sorry, no, you are the party, the wing, the movement of implicit bias, especially the communists. Everyone's biased in all things, and therefore there's no objectivity, blah, blah, blah. Don't sit there and try and fall back on this, well, I'm a scientist, I'm being objective, I've removed my feelings from this. Nonsense, right?
She's still in the committee.
Yeah. Yeah, for some reason, Boris hasn't fired.
That's a bigger story for me, where it's just like,
I know.
the moment anyone found out you were a communist
we'll
party
get to it.
member,
We've still got loads to get through, right? And so the communists at Novara Media obviously had her back. Let's play clip 1.
Okay, so what Richard was saying is that because communism is a statist ideology and Susan is allegedly a member of a communist party, that she's come to her view because she's ideologically wedded to the idea of the state controlling individuals.
Correct.
Now, I think it's a pretty big claim to make on the integrity of a scientist that they'd be led by political biases and not their interpretation of the data, the evidence in front of them.
What a reach. What an absolute reach. Mengele? That's right. He's just a scientist. He's just going on his interpretation of the data that he extracted because he can operate on Jews with impunity because he's a Nazi and he doesn't see them as human. But the integrity of the scientists. Don't agree that the scientists have any integrity. I mean, can you name one that has some integrity? Wasn't Neil Ferguson? We need lockdowns. Also, I'm going to break lockdowns. Sorry, I've got no respect for the scientists who are in charge here. And
scientists are people.
Yeah, and that's exactly the point. That's going on their interpretation of the data. Yes, the interpretation of the data is their bias because my interpretation of the data, with fewer than 9 people yesterday having died within 28 days of a test, confirming nothing at all, and the fact that the problem just seems to have actually resolved itself at this point, means that my interpretation, through my bias of someone who wants liberty, means that we shouldn't have lockdowns. And so if a communist can look at that and come to, we need more lockdowns, then that's clearly an expression of our individual political biases.
I mean, she's not just a statist, she's a totalitarian.
Yes.
Everything should be under the state for.
But so now we have to leap to no, not communism. Communism's perfect. So let's go to the next clip.
Are communists more likely to be in favour of maintaining strict lockdowns or indeed preserving mask mandates? Well, the problem for Richard Madley is that mask mandates don't really correlate all that strongly with communism. I think that if Susan Mickey was saying that collectivizing agriculture was key to controlling the virus, then sure, you might have a point in saying your membership of the Communist Party is relevant to what you're saying. But in this instance, there is simply no connection between seizing the means of production and everybody wear a mask other than in Richard Madley's fevered imagination.
Ash, think about this. You're a communist. The person you're defending is a communist. The other guest you have on your podcast is a communist. And I can't think of a single communist who is pro-opening up. All of the communists are pro-lockdown. You're pro-lockdown. Why are you saying this? Why are you lying about this? And what I love about this is the very thin definition of communism. Well, communism is just collective ownership of the means of production. oh, well, if that's it, then why do you talk about it at all? You've got nothing to say because we're not collectivizing the means of production. But it's not about that, of course. This is
any socialist regime on earth, all they do is collectivize the farms, and that's it. They never touch culture at all.
Exactly. They are not totalitarians. They don't feel that they have a mandate to reshape society according to the revolution or anything like that, Ash. No, your audience are stupid, and they know that they probably do know that you're lying, but they probably agree with you lying. But the point is, you're lying, and you know you are, by giving this very thin definition of communism that speaks not to the people who are engaged in it. But anyway, the problem that Ash has, of course, is that the guests on her own show just come out and be like, yeah, I'm a communist, I want lockdowns. Let's play the next clip.
But Javid, as I mentioned, he is even more obstinately against restrictions of any kind, even when it clearly makes sense to have, mild, somewhat mildly inconvenient restrictions in order for long-term sustainable collective health. And this kind of leads to this Darwinian approach where it's let the bodies pile high in order to sort of secure the investments and business of a tiny group of people.
Right. So communists, pro-lockdown. Literally saying we want restrictions on people's freedom for the collective health. There is no such thing as collective health. Health is an individual subject as well. So one person might be healthy, another person might be unhealthy. There is no collective health between them, right? But anyway,
I'm not going to get into
it doesn't matter, right? But the point is, all of the communists are in favour of the lockdowns, and it's the conservatives who are in favour of opening up. And what I find really interesting about that is that woman is absolutely dumb, because the idea that, the 1% want to open up because then they make money. No, the lockdowns have facilitated an unprecedented transfer of wealth from regular working people to billionaires. This is not new. This is not a surprise. We know this. We in fact know exactly how much went across from working people to billionaires. 10.2 trillion, apparently. According to a report by the Swiss bank UBS, billionaires increased their wealth by more than a quarter at the height of the crisis, just as millions of people lost their jobs or were struggling to get by on government schemes. The communists want the same thing that will make billionaires even richer. And the question, I guess, is why? Now, the answer, I think, is to destabilize capitalism so they can instigate their revolutions, so they can overthrow the capitalist system, bring about the socialist system, and end up killing millions of people. Any critique with that?
Couple of things. I mean, firstly, the Ash Sarkar point that the communists only care about collective farming and nothing else. They don't touch a damn thing.
It's such a lie.
Let me just explain the DPRK's rules on haircuts. Yeah. Why are there no mohawks in the DPRK?
But they're concerned about culture in all forms. You know, it's totalitarian. It's every aspect of life. So for her to fall back on the most thin definition, a Marxist definition of what communism is, it's such an obvious lie. And again, why are all the communists in favour of lockdown if communism has no correlation to lockdown?
The USSR had no problems with what clothes you wore.
I mean, you weren't even allowed to leave the USSR.
Such obvious lie.
I know.
The other point here I do want to mention, because the idea that the money's just going to the billionaires, I mean, not really true. I mean, you've got the other point here, though, of a lot of people are losing a lot of money.
It's disproportionate, and it's easy to understand why.
But take the middle, let's say wealthy, whatever. Mm-hmm. A lot of them are getting screwed over as well.
Sure.
Of course, to try and increase the wealth gap, I think that's a fair point to be made, that that's what they want, and therefore they're happy with it. But take, like, Wetherspoons. I mean, Wetherspoons has got absolutely destroyed by all of this.
Yeah, but Amazon is doing great. It's because the business model, right? The business model of Wetherspoons is actually the same, essentially, as the business model as the regular business owner, the person who has a high street shop, who needs the shop to be open and people to come in to get their money and to do trade. That's the same model as Wetherspoons, and they can't change that. Whereas Amazon or various other, companies that can operate remotely in the sort of same way, they're doing amazingly. And so Ash Sarkar and all the other communists are like, yeah, we should do what makes them wealthier. Why? Why do you want to rip money away from the average working person and give it to billionaires that you claim to hate? You are either stupid or you are lying, and I'm not feeling very generous. Anyway, so coming back to the totalitarian statist nature that Richard Madley had brought up, accurately so, it turns out that the scientists admit that their use of fear was totalitarian. They just know it. They know that what they did was unethical. This was the SPIB, the Scientific Pandemic Influenza Group on Behavior. This is the group that Mickey, whatever her name was, Susan Mickey, is part of.
The communist millionaire.
The communist millionaire, yes. And so this is her group, and Gavin Morgan is another one of those. And this group seems to be essentially made up a majority of communists. Rory's doing a big investigation into these, in fact, that will be done, I'm sure, in the next week or so. But it seems a lot of them are communists. And so it should come as no surprise that essentially they've been totally dishonest and totally unethical. So the SPIB have said they've expressed regret about tactics in a new book about the role of psychology in the government's COVID response. They warned that last year that ministers needed to, quote, increase the perceived level of personal threat from COVID-19 because a substantial number of people do not feel personally sufficiently threatened. You aren't scared. We need to make you more afraid. That's what these scientists advised the government. Gavin Morgan, a psychologist on the team and probably a communist, said clearly using fear as a means of control is not ethical. Then why'd you do it? Why'd you do it? Why was that your advice? If you turn around a year later and go, actually that was evil. Why did we do that? Because you're evil. That's why, right? Using fear smacks of totalitarianism. Yeah, well, you're surrounded by communists. Of course you're totalitarians. It's not an ethical stance for any modern government. By nature, I'm an optimistic person, but all this has given me is a more pessimistic view of people. It's given me a more pessimistic view of scientists and the unjust authority they seem to have accrued. So, ministers faced repeated accusations they ramped up the threat from the pandemic to justify lockdowns and coerce the public into abiding by them, a claim that will be examined in a forthcoming public inquiry into the pandemic response. These are one of the subcommittees that advise SAGE, so it's like organs upon organs of government bodies, basically. But one SPIB scientist told the Telegraph, in March 2020, the government was very worried about compliance. They thought people wouldn't want to be locked down. There were discussions about fear being needed to encourage compliance and decisions about how to ramp up the fear. The way we have used fear is dystopian. The use of fear has definitely been ethically questionable. It's been like a weird experiment. Ultimately, it backfired because people became too scared. Another SPIB member said, you could call psychology mind control. That's what we do. Clearly, we tried to go about it in a positive way, but it has been used nefariously in the past. And another warned that people will use the pandemic to power grab and drive things through that wouldn't happen otherwise. We have to be very careful about the authoritarianism that is creeping in. The communists who are advising the government, who want us to be locked down forever in order to destroy capitalism, are using fear-mongering totalitarian methods in order to get that goal achieved. And when confronted on this by Richard Madley, all the communists can say is, well, I'm just the scientist. Liars. All of them. Hate it.
It's really depressing.
Yeah.
It's like, vote conservative.
None of them will be held to account either.
Group of commie billionaires are the ones running the show.
Yeah. They're a group of communists and they're brainless activists who are all in favour of the 0.0001%, who are the evil capitalists that are puppeteering the world according to them, but they want to do everything to enrich and empower these people, at the same time while ruining society. If you enjoyed this segment from the podcast of the Lotus Eaters, you can watch the full broadcast live every weekday at 1 PM UK time on lotuseaters.com.